Getting up close and intimate. Totally Not Taboo with Tracy. Celebrating sexual positivity both in and outside the bedroom.
Hi, learner lovers. This is Totally Not Taboo with Tracy. Welcome to this week's episode. And today we have Casey Blake with us in the studio. Welcome, Casey.
Thanks, Tracy.
We actually we talk about Totally Not Taboo. We talk about everything that is taboo around sex and sexuality. So for our audience, we're going to be talking to you today. But before we get going, let me introduce you to our audience. So Casey is a registered counselor with a special interest in trauma, relationships, parenting, sexuality, and gender. She has a master's degree in research psychology, where her research looked at experiences of school-based sex education. So, Casey, you have a very impressive CV, and
Thanks, Tracy.
I want to make an impact on our audience. And, you know, as exciting as my voice might be, I don't want the audience to for your CV to lose impact. So why don't you tell everybody more about yourself and why, where you specialize, and more importantly, why you feel what you do is considered taboo.
I know. Okay. So I'm hesitating because whenever people ask me to tell them about myself, I always go blank and go, I don't know what you want to know. So I have been working in the field of sexual health and sexual well-being for pretty much my whole career. All my postgraduate degrees, research projects have looked at communication around sexuality. And like you read out, my master's looked at whether first university students thought that the school-based sex ed helped them. Spoiler alert, no, it didn't. So part of my focus on parenting and parenting around sexuality is most parents don't know what information is appropriate because so few of us had actual education around what sexuality is and all the pieces that work into our sexuality. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for or thinking about.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things, and there are quite a few questions that I want to ask you, and some theories of my own that I want to check out with you.
Sure.
So I read in one of your bios as well that you particularly liked working with parents of children who don't really kind of fit a mold of gender assignment, let's say. And you work with those parents who feel a certain amount of, feel a bit of disappointment when it comes to gender appointment, or they kind of like they didn't get the child that they kind of wanted. And it sounds a bit sad because no parent wants to reject a child, and you're not really rejecting your child. You're just battling to come to terms with the fact that your child might be different from everybody else's. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, gender is one way that children can be different to how parents expect. But let's think about when you find out you're pregnant and this is a thing that you want and you are wanting to be a parent. We immediately come up with these dreams and fantasies about how our children are going to do this, and we're going to have these activities with them, and we're all going to enjoy life in this particular way, and we create this entire life based on a positive pregnancy test. And once our children are born, sometimes we find out that they have learning difficulties, and even that can impact our dreams of how we thought our lives together as parent and child would be. And I think that in a similar way, when we find out that our children have a gender that is not the one we've assigned to them at birth based on their genitals, that is not what we had dreamed of I think many parents of girl children dream of their weddings, and many parents of boy children dream of their weddings in a different way. And we have these dreams about mostly heterosexual children. So when our children come out as not heterosexual, and they have to, because we heterosexualize children from the minute they're born. These gender reveal parties are part of heterosexualizing unborn children. Not just on gender, but we make the assumption that because the cake came out pink, they're going to have a blue partner. All these different things.
I love that. I love that, Casey. And especially when it comes to transgender kids, there's a lot of loss, as there is with homosexual kids. There's so much loss that the parents have to deal with.
I mean, just a note, and I'm still learning about language too, but homosexual is not a word that everybody feels comfortable using, because it was used to pathologize people who weren't straight. It was the category in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual until the 80s. So it is no longer the umbrella word that we think of it as. Some people have reclaimed it and said, well, you can pathologize me all you want. I'm reclaiming this word. A lot of people prefer gay. Not everybody prefers lesbian. There's lots of different words out there. I think that's why so many people go towards queer, because it just doesn't give you an answer. It just says, I'm questioning constantly. But when our children come out to us as queer or gay, or even bisexual, we as parents, we worry that they're going to get bullied. We don't want them to get bullied. But what we don't realize is, by not supporting our children, we're doing a form of bullying ourselves. You can never bully someone into what you want them to be. It's never going to work.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the word queer, and I have such a negative connotation attached to queer, because especially when I was brought up in my generation, queer was a nasty word to call someone. On the playground, it was a teasing word. Oh, you're so queer. So it doesn't fit with me, and yet I know now I have to change my vocabulary, the way I use the word.
Well, that's another reclaimed slur. So when someone used to say, you're so queer, it was, you're so different, you're so weird, you're probably gay.
Exactly.
Whereas now, people who might be gay just feel like they don't fit into this very narrow box of straight and cisgender, because queer can refer to sexuality, can refer to gender identity, gender expression. When someone says, I am queer, it's a reclamation. So it's not a slur. It's kind of like what you're going to do about it.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. What is cisgender?
Such a good question. I'm going to make a few assumptions about you for our listeners to participate in, so you can also answer these questions yourselves. But Tracy, when did you know you were a girl?
Oh, I think as young as 3, when I was conscious of myself in my body, when I put on my Queen Esther dress at Purim time and wore a little crown and felt pretty, I suppose.
So from about 3, you felt like a girl. What makes you a girl? You've spoken about your Queen Esther dress. What else?
I think that's I would definitely say not the fact that I have a vulva and a vagina, and definitely not. I think, maybe I was told, you're such a cute little girl, such a pretty little girl.
And when you heard that, it made you feel happy? It sounded, that sounds like me. I like hearing that.
I don't think there was much of there was no landing there. And I have 2 sisters, so there was not much, there was nothing really to compare us to. It wasn't that there were boys beside my father. There wasn't, there was nobody to compare us to for a long time.
So when people said you're such a cute girl, or you're a pretty girl, or used the word girl, it felt right. There wasn't a part of you that went, who are you talking to? What girl, looking over your shoulder? Right? So So that idea that you were assigned a gender at birth, probably based on your vulva, and people called you a girl and treated you like a girl, and it's never felt off. That's what cisgender means. Cisgender is spelled CIS. It's the Latin word for same. So cisgender is the same gender you were assigned.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope that it's answered some questions for our audience as well.
Mm.
So I love the fact that you talk to parents of children who maybe, and I'm assuming, so I'm asking you to clarify, who have difficulties talking to their children about sex,
Mm.
or difficult teenagers who are going through a difficult period with their children into puberty, maybe strange behavior they're eliciting, whatever. And I remember very clearly that because I speak so openly about sex, especially to my children, and yes, it has caused some embarrassment at times. A very good friend of mine said to me, just remember, when my children want to talk about sex, I'm sending them to you, because she couldn't imagine ever talking, having these conversations with her kids. So, and nonetheless, one of them did come to talk to me. But tell me, so here is my assumption that these parents, and I'm not going to mention mothers or fathers in particular, but the reasons that they possibly cannot speak to their children about sex is because they have issues with their own sexuality.
Sometimes it's because they don't know what is appropriate, because we live in such a hypersexualized society that is paired with sex negativity. We don't know what's appropriate. So I want to differentiate the different types of work. So I do work with parents who are having difficulties. That would be in the counseling side. And then I do work with people who want to learn how to have these conversations. Where do I start? How do I know what's okay? Those are the workshops I do. So those are run for the public, not necessarily my clients. And in the workshops, we cover everything that parents often avoid talking about in case it's linked to sex. So it's not always when they have an uncomfortableness about their own sexuality, but it does play a role. But often because we live in the society, we are steeped in this hypersexualized, sex negative space that we don't know what's appropriate. And we are so worried that our children are being exposed to inappropriate things that we don't want to respond in a way that's going to shut down conversation, but we also want to make sure that they're safe.
So if you wouldn't mind giving me an example of something that gets discussed in your group, if it's not about difficult conversations around sex.
Well, we'll start with the first workshop, which speaks about how do you as a family speak about bodies? Are eyes, ears, nose, and vulva spoken about in the same way? One of the reasons I start there is because as society, we are uncomfortable with the presence of genitals because they're sexual organs. And our toddlers learn this. Very seldom do toddlers have accurate anatomical names for their genitals, and names because it's not just a penis. It's not just a vagina. I hate that because it takes away everything that could be pleasurable about the vulva, and it diminishes it down to a canal. Vulvas have labia, vulvas have a vestibule and a clitoris and a urethra. All these things have sensations. And if children can have names for them, then, and it's not a sexual thing. We wee out of our urethra. Unless you're into water sports, that isn't a sexual thing. I've had parents who speak about that place with their children. What does that place mean? Where on that place are you itchy? Where on that place did someone want to see or touch or look? So because it might be sex, we don't even talk about genitals. And that's one place to start.
So give me an idea of what you encourage parents to use naming male and female genitals.
We'll just name all kinds of genitals. Get books. There's lots of beautiful resources available online with labeled genitals. They're nice drawings or paintings. And you can say, let's pull up a mirror and see which one of these two do you look more like, because we will never look like the drawings. No two vulvas are the same and no two penises are the same. And be able to say, oh, look, there's the anus in the drawing. Where's your anus in the mirror? There's the scrotum. There's your scrotum. There's the raphe of the scrotum, in case people don't know what that is, it's the line that joins the scrotum together. Where's the shaft of your penis? Where's the head of your penis? Where's your foreskin if they've got one? Those kinds of conversations are vital. And what we've found, we as sex educators across the world, is that when children have language for these things, they are not silent around their genitals, which means predators are less likely to find them as attractive prey because they've already got language. They are more likely to tell somebody about their genitals.
So don't touch my vulva.
Don't touch my vulva. And Mom, so-and-so wanted to ask about my vulva. Right?
Yeah.
So when we've got language, we're empowered. I'm not going to say that teaching your children all the language is going to stop something from happening, but there's a high chance that if they can talk to you about it, it's not going to happen more than once.
So when we were having our brief chat, and I used the words Sanskrit for yoni, which is vagina, and lingam for penis, you didn't like those either.
Because you don't speak Sanskrit. You don't speak Sanskrit. There's so many homes where there's bilingual stuff going on. So I've had so many families come and talk to me where at home they speak English, even though there's also Portuguese or Croatian or Spanish or Italian, but somehow the genitals are only Croatian, Spanish, Italian, or Portuguese.
Yes.
So we can speak about them, but they're always othered.
Yes.
There's always something stopping us from owning the language, which makes the English language uncomfortable and makes the English language awkward or inappropriate.
So I had such an interesting conversation. I was on YFM on their late night show a couple of months ago, and we were having the talk about sexuality and the naming of body parts. And somebody called in and said, if you use the word penis in any of the African languages, or I can't remember if there was a specific one, Zulu or Sotho or Sesotho, people would think you're swearing at them.
Well, we have the same thing in English. Can I swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Not my favorite words, but we've got cock, cunt, and dick and pussy. All of these words are used as derogatory names for people.
True.
They're used as swear words, but they're not vulva and they're not penis. These are words that nursery school children are hearing and using at school. Maybe they know what it means, maybe they don't, but they also know if I call you this, it hurts your feelings. I'm saying something's not okay with you. I'm saying you're not all right. I'm calling you a name. And I think that because our collective cultures have been avoiding anatomical language because of the power it gives us, it has been used as swear words. I was on a podcast with Lebo Pule, and we were talking about in vernacular. We're not sure if we know what vulva and penis actually is in vernacular, because we've also got the equivalent of flower and cookie. And those are the common words. I'm in a group of a bunch of people, educators, social justice people. It's the Sexuality, SRJC, Sexual Reproductive Justice Coalition. And whenever there's new documents being worked out, we're always like, who knows the vernac in Sesotho for these words? Who knows what it is in Venda? Who knows what it is in Tsonga? And even Tsonga-speaking people go, let me see if any of my family know. These are not common language. Absolutely. So it separates us, it dissociates us from our genitals.
100%. Well, Casey, now that we're just talking about the body,
Yeah.
we need to go to a break, a commercial break. So here it goes. We all know summer bodies are built in winter, but that can be easier said than done. So why not join fitness expert Mo on the Health Fix with Mo for an inspirational weekly fitness podcast show for fitness novices. Mo chats to the best in local health and fitness experts in an effort to get information to help you achieve your aesthetic, fitness, and health goals. Subscribe on YouTube, listen on any good podcast platform, or find it on www.yourmedia.co.za. Your Media, hashtag where you are. Okay.
Mhm.
So, having the talk, tools for having the talks. There are, I'm sure you have a very big and heavy toolbox.
It is a 9-hour workshop split into 3 days.
So why don't you tell us more about that?
So it is what it sounds like. I help parents create a toolbox so that they can have the many talks, plural, as early as possible and as often as possible with their children, not just so that they can speak about things, but so that their children feel safe talking to them whenever they have questions, concerns, curiosities. So often children come and ask us questions where they have an answer in mind and they want to see if they are right. They want a confirmation. So one of the best tools I ever can offer people is, instead of trying to rush and answer your children, ask them what they think. Ask them what they think the word means, if it's a question around words or the concept. Ask them, have they heard other people talk about it in different ways? What are the different ways? And then come in with accurate information and engage around the content they've already got for you.
Love that.
I mean, parents often do their best and we flounder. I had a client who recently spoke to me about how when she was asking her parents questions, they didn't know how to answer her. So when she was listening to the news, as we all, I suppose, accidentally do, there was another report of a gang rape. And she asked her mom what rape was. And the response was, why do you want to get raped?
Sure.
Now, that mom did not have any tools in her toolbox. She did not know how to talk about how people go and actively violate other people, and in what ways we do that. And so instead, she just said the first thing that came to mind. That is not the right way to answer. You can say, what do you think? What have you heard? What have you heard people talk about? What does it sound like to you? We also use the word rape in terms of sport, which is not rape. So children often hear it in terms of sports talk. This team beat the other team. Instead of saying beat, we use raped. So it's very confusing for children. What does it mean? Does it mean I beat you? Does it mean I violate? What? We have to ask them where they've heard it, what their friends think, how do they feel when they hear the word, and then tell them the information. And we have to be accurate. If they're old enough to ask, they're old enough to hear the answer, and it's an honest answer. But we don't have to go into too many details. Rape is when somebody engages in a sexual act with another person against their will.
And if we have to break it down for even, I know that you say if you're old enough to ask the question, you're old enough to hear the answer, but still, that might be a little bit vague for, let's say, a 9-year-old who can read, but still maybe not understand sexual violation or without consent, or words like that.
Well, my workshops help parents of nursery school children talk about consent so that we know what it means when we say yes.
Right.
Consent is not the absence of no, it is the presence of an enthusiastic, reversible yes. So once again, the reason why we say, what do you think? What have you heard? Is so that we can target it to their level. I have a joke that says, Johnny goes to his mom, Mom, where do I come from? And Mom's ready. She's got the sperm and the egg and the what those tubes from the ovaries called now, I can't find them.
Fallopian
Thank
tubes.
you, fallopian tubes. And she's got the whole story in the uterus and pregnancy. And Johnny listens and he nods and he's taking it seriously. He goes, that's good. But Sipho comes from Cape Town.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
And that's why we ask them, what do you think?
Yeah.
So if our child knows about consent, or if our child says, what kind of sexual acts? Well, legally in South Africa, it is the penetration. It is the sexual penetration of somebody, object or penis or finger. So if, and we talk about it, we say, if somebody puts their penis in another person's mouth and that person doesn't want it, it is rape. If you force somebody to put their penis in your mouth, that is rape. If somebody puts their finger into your vagina, that is rape.
Or anus.
Or anus. All these different ways of talk. That's why we have to expand sex with in our conversations outside of penis and vagina. Because luckily our legal system recognizes all kinds of non-consensual penetration, which is actually not wanted penetration, as rape.
100%. So I have this idea in my mind that because I talk about self-pleasure with my clients a lot, and I ask them, do you engage in self-pleasure? And then they look at me, you mean masturbation? Yes. And then obviously I use it as a tool for continued conversation because being an intimacy coach, I talk about self-pleasure, whatever. So we then look at the taboos around self-pleasure, and we talk about how prominent or how more accepted it is to find your little 4, 3, 5, 6-year-old boy sitting on the couch watching TV, playing with his penis. And the minute he gets an erection, everyone laughs, maybe claps, whatever it is. But heaven forbid you should walk into the TV room and find your little girl rocking on a pillow, a toy, or something like that, and everyone freaks out. Get to your room. Wash your hands. Or she might even have her hands in her panties. Wash your hands. Get to your room. That's disgusting, etc., etc. So we do talk about that a lot. And my wish, and I wanted to run this past you, is that at that moment, if mom or dad could take little Alice up to her room and say, I'm going to teach you something about your body that I hope that you will remember and continue to practice. And she holds a mirror to her vulva and says, this is your vulva. I mean, I assume maybe not, that during bath time, we've had a discussion around your vulva and who's allowed to touch it. And we've also taught our little girls not to wash inside the vulva and what is best practice in terms of hygiene. That the mum takes a mirror to Alice's vulva, says, touch it, tell me what it feels like, and welcome to this, your vulva. Now, you will feel pleasure from it one day. In fact, you may feel pleasure at the moment, and you will feel more pleasure as you get older. And then set boundaries around when it's appropriate to touch your vulva. And even say, mom loves to touch her vulva, and she feels really good when she touches it, but you don't see her sitting with her friends around the coffee table here at home with her hands in her panties. And when we go out for dinner as a family, you don't see mom sitting with her hands in her panties, just like you don't see dad or your brother doing the same thing. So this is a special private place for you to explore and feel good when you touch it. So what do you think of that idea?
I have so many thoughts and feelings.
Okay, tell me.
So I think the idea behind it is not a bad one, but I have problems with us gifting people their own bodies.
Right.
It's not ours to gift. So I think that when we see children touching themselves, before we take them out the room, we can say, "Oh, what you doing? Does it feel nice? Have you ever seen me do that? Do you think that's because I don't do it or I do it in private?" I think the conversation about these are your genitals and it can feel nice, have to happen over many different conversations. So then once you've normalized it and you've been like, yes, it's nice, isn't it? Come, let's go to your room. Let's talk about it privately. So I think the idea of us saying to people, here it is, go for it, is important. But I think the way in which we do it with children so that it remains theirs and remains private and it's not for us either. So I feel like if we say to children, here you go, rub it, isn't it nice? While we're there, we are doing something that is violating their own privacy and their own exploration. So it's important to talk about how they don't see us doing it. That doesn't mean we don't do it.
Right.
We're not hiding it either. We're not shamed by it. It is beautiful, but it's personal. It's for us. So if you've got your own room, that's where you can do this. It is not for other people to be involved in any kind of way. And I think that helps them in terms of boundaries, most children who do the exploration doctor do so because they're curious. They want to know what's the difference. So if we have these conversations early and often about these are the differences, look at the pictures, you're going to see people who have bodies that look like this, a little bit different, but in the same kind of idea. Lots of people have bodies like yours, a little bit different, very different. Not, just creating diversity and so many different ways of being diverse. That's why I love the idea of homes who feel comfortable with nudity, because it creates a space where you can talk about private and public within the one home. So if everyone's nude at home, it's because this is a private place, but we still don't do things in front of others in this private place. Some things are even more private than nudity. But also what's nice about nudity at home is as soon as somebody else enters the home, whether it's a friend or a domestic worker, we all put clothes on, right? So our private place has now become a public place, and we now all have clothes on because we're protecting everybody's boundaries. We're not letting you be seen by people who you may not want to be seen by, and we're also not making other people look at us if it's going to make them uncomfortable. And it's creating these kinds of what works for me, works for you, kind of dialogues. So I love, please give permission to your children to touch themselves. But yes, they need to wash their hands before they touch their genitals. Not because they're touching their genitals, because hygiene's a thing.
Absolutely.
So if they're going to be rubbing themselves, rub themselves with clean hands. Wash your hands first. So
Absolutely.
I think the biggest thing is to be casual and curious with our children when they do something that causes us feelings. Because the minute we reprimand them, the minute we interrogate them, we have now closed so many doors that we have been working on opening, and we have to go back and work and open those doors all over again. And we're human. So all human relationships have repair and rupture and repair and rupture and rupture and repair. But we all pick up on who we can talk to about what. We know how people respond based on watching them interact with the other people. And we make a decision for ourselves. I don't want to be spoken to like that. I'm not going to bring this topic to you. So we as parents have to bring the conversation and prove ourselves as reliable and consistent as curious.
And safe.
Absolutely safe.
And, I wish, even in a perfect world, I wish that we could raise our children without shame and guilt and humiliation around our bodies, Gee, that would be amazing, because it's really difficult to be able to educate the whole world and everybody's responses, external responses, and we can control our own, as you said, we can control what goes on in our own home, but we absolutely can't control everybody else's responses around us. There was something else that I wanted to touch on in terms of my own ideas. We spoke about it as well briefly. I cannot for the life of me think of what it was. Do you remember?
I didn't write anything down when we spoke.
I know as we finish, I'm going to say, oh, what was it? That was it. And I needed to find out what Casey felt about it. Anyway.
I think we also mentioned the sex education that happens in schools and parents' feelings around it.
Absolutely.
Do you remember what you were going to ask?
Well, I can definitely ask something about this, and that is, well, it's really a statement, and I want to know how you deal with this. So parents generally, some, and depends on which schools you go to as well, maybe it might be all, we send our children to school to be educated. And yet, when the system educates the children, the parents have something to say about it.
Mm.
Have you experienced this?
I have. I think of it as the way. So we send them to school to get educated, of course, to learn how to think, to learn how to engage with the world, to learn how to navigate different elements of society. That's what school is supposed to teach us. Whether it does it successfully is a different conversation. But when it comes to sex education, I think parents think that it's honestly about sex. And so often sex education could be renamed as protective behavior information. It could be renamed as relationship education. It is so often about who do you talk to when you feel unsafe? How do you know when you feel unsafe? These kinds of things are not okay, even if they feel nice. Who do you speak to if these things happen? That's what goes into sex ed. Our government has released the lesson plans, the scripted lesson plans. Whether the schools follow them is another story. Teachers are humans after all, and humans are part of society, and they have their own struggles if they haven't been trained properly in these kinds of conversations. But I think so many parents expect to outsource their sex ed to the schools, but don't know what is being taught, often don't take the time to engage with the teachers to find out what's being taught. And I don't think sex education in school is the end all and be all. I think it's important. I think if we're going to reach the most amount of people, the school system is the way to go about it, because schooling is compulsory. But I think if you as parents are worried about what's happening in sex education, do sex ed at home. Have these conversations at home so your children feel safe to tell you what they learned at school. And you can talk about it. You can talk about how you feel about the information, if you feel different, if you agree, if you've got mixed feelings. But that sex ed at school is a conversation starter, not the end all and be all.
Yeah. And unfortunately, from the experience that I've had with having my kids through the school system, it doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. You always have parents who've got something to say about what their children have been taught, coming home with this information, and who told you this, and how dare they be telling you this, and it's not okay to be exposing my children to this information. And even though all parents consent to having sex ed at school, there's a lot of resistance. So
I think it comes from fear.
Exactly.
I think it comes from a protective thing. Like I said earlier, parents didn't have sex ed. And if they did, it was normally porn. So they don't know what sex ed means.
True.
So instead of asking their children what they think about it, how do they conceptualize the information?
Yeah.
You know, there's ways to engage with it that tell your children, you can talk to me about this later. when we say to the children, that is inappropriate, the child goes, cool, not going to tell you about the STD I think I have. Not going to tell you about the fact that I am burning when I urinate, even though it's only thrush, but I don't know, or it's only a UTI, but I don't know because I can't talk to you about sex stuff because you freak out.
Yeah, 100%. Casey, would you like to leave you've been given, you've given us so many jewels to take
Thanks,
away
Tracy.
with us. Really, it's been an awesome conversation. Anything that you'd like to leave our audience with to think about?
I think if you're not the person having these kinds of conversations with them, that does not mean they're not having these conversations. They're just not having them with you. So I like to tell parents and encourage parents to go to websites like amaze.org, where there are conversation starter videos you can watch with your children. Sex Positive Families is full of resources for conversation starters, book recommendations, so that when your children learn things from other people, as they inevitably will, they can come to you and tell you what they've learned.
100%. What do you think of Big Mouth?
I think it is a brilliant show for adults. I get uncomfortable watching it. I have not made my way through season 2. I think season 1, the puberty, the vulva episodes, brilliant. I think for teens, watching that with your kids and owning your own discomfort, my biggest thing is for parents to own their humanity.
I loved watching it with my kids. I absolutely loved the humor, and I loved watching them laughing.
It is such a beautiful, honest, uncomfortable, awkward teenage experience.
Yeah.
I think watching it with your young teens and your older teens, but especially your young teens, I think it is such a gift if you can pause it and have conversations and say, little son, I don't know, Sean, why do you think I'm so uncomfortable as an adult watching this?
Love it. And sex education?
Love it.
Great.
Love it. Same thing. I think these are actually not for young children. They are who they are going. If you don't have these conversations, that's where they get their information from. And not everything in Big Mouth is accurate.
Yeah.
Especially the coach. Wow. But I think sex education is such a beautiful representation of how adult teens actually are and how they are navigating these things. There's also Degrassi is a lovely series. I only watched the Next Class seasons.
What's it called?
Degrassi. It's a high school in Canada also going through these kinds of things. Beautifully represented, beautifully articulating the difficulties of these things. There's a, spoiler alert, there's an accident and somebody gets sensory issues as they're recovering and how their friends don't know how to deal with the difference.
Wow.
It's just so many beautiful shows that you can watch with your kids, even from age 10, to be honest. But you need to have conversations. You can't just watch it and go, there we go. You need to have conversations. You have to ask them what they think. You have to ask them, is there anything there that made them uncomfortable? What do they think made you uncomfortable based on your reactions or just how they know you? Because they know us.
Yeah. I loved it, sex education. Besides my kids saying, Mom, you have to watch this. The mother's just you. It's just you. So embarrassing, just like you. And then my friend saying, you've got to watch sex education. This is you. This is you. It was hilarious. So eventually I did. And I found it incredibly real, and I could connect with it. Exactly. Yes.
What I loved is the characters had language. They had language for vaginismus.
Yes.
They had language for arousal. They had language for discomfort.
Yes. I loved it. It was brilliant. It was so real.
There's so many problems with it, but we're not doing that kind of conversation.
Fantastic. Casey, thank you.
Tracy, thank you.
How are we going to get hold of you on Instagram, Facebook, all social media handles?
Tools for Having the Talks. I am on Facebook, Tools for Having the Talks. Don't forget the S, it's a plural. Instagram, same thing. I have a website, www.toolsforhavingthetalks.coza. If you're looking for counseling, www.whatnowcounseling.coza. Those are the best ways to get hold of me.
Fantastic. Again, you've been an incredible, incredible guest, and just so informative and really an absolute insightful and educational guest, and really delightful. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Tracy.
And yeah, so if anybody wants to get hold of you, they can also contact me on my website as well, www.totallyme.co.za, and also social media handles, Tracy, Totally Me Tracy, Totally Me Tracy. So that's it for our episode today.